This girl built a haunted house in the creepiest dorm in America, and she did it for less than $1,000. This is Morrill Tower at The Ohio State University. Students call it the creepiest dorm in America. Why? Because it was once home to a guy you've definitely heard of, Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, that Jeffrey Dahmer. And the history only gets creepier from here. Flashback to the 1960s. If you graduated high school in Ohio, congratulations, you basically had an automatic ticket into The Ohio State University. But that meant that enrollment eventually skyrocketed to over 50,000 students. So Ohio State had a huge problem, not enough dorm space. So what was the solution? Brutalist architecture, basically giant concrete blocks with colors and styles that only a murderous dictator could love. And to top it off, they crammed in communal living and bathrooms and open living spaces that were supposed to bring students together. That's how Morrill Tower and Lincoln Tower were born. Together, these twin towers could house a whole lot of students. Problem solved, right? Wrong. It was a disaster. Students hated it. Rumors swirled that some students even unalived themselves by jumping out of the windows. Now, just to prove I'm not making this up, I was able to find an eyewitness who was actually there back then. So I'm taking the highly unprofessional yet still totally awesome step of interviewing my mom, who knew all about Morrill Tower because she was at Ohio State back then.
They used to call it Tower because there was so little privacy. You couldn't get away from other people. And the rumor was that some people, opened the windows somehow and jumped out. That can happen in college situations, but I think they blamed it on the fact that, there were too many bodies packed in there. And it didn't last very long before they shut it down.
So Morrill Tower was shut down and abandoned after a mysterious death before making a comeback many years later. Sounds like the plot to another certain Tower of Terror attraction. And because of this, Morrill Tower has been notorious with students at The Ohio State University ever since, which makes it a perfect place for a haunted house. And it just so happens that Ohio State now hosts an annual event called Are You Ready? Paramoral. It's just too perfect. And now in Morrill Tower's defense, they did make it better, and even the most notorious tower at The Ohio State University is still better than going to Michigan, and I'm not biased at all. Cheaters. Enter Audrey Nelson. She's not just a student, she's a mechanical engineering major, and she even interned at SpaceX. So basically, she's a rocket scientist who decided to build a haunted house in her spare time. But here's the crazy part. Creating a haunted attraction isn't just tossing up some scary decorations. Audrey had to design it, build it, market it, actually operate it with her theme park engineering club. That's like 5 different jobs at once. It's a theme park operations masterclass, and that's where our interview begins. So we sat down with Audrey to find out, how do you take one of the creepiest dorms in America and turn it into a nightmare-fueled attraction on a budget smaller than the cost of most college textbooks? Ready? Let's begin. Hi, Audrey. Why don't you tell us about it?
Hello. I'm Audrey Nelson, and I go to The Ohio State University. I study mechanical engineering, and I am a junior this year. And I am in theme park engineering group at OSU, and I am vice president and project manager. So we have always wanted to do a haunted house or some sort of haunted attraction because a lot of other schools that have theme park clubs have done them as well. So we wanted to really try to do it at Ohio State. And also, we did it at Morrill Tower, which is a very iconic dorm tower. So it's always been difficult, like with housing, trying to get space for projects and also money towards projects. So it's hard to just get the money in general. So it's been a struggle. But this year we had 2 people in our club, Ariana and Jack. They're resident advisors of Morrill Tower. And funny enough, Morrill Tower hosts a Halloween event every single year. And while they were doing RA training, they mentioned to the hall director, they asked him if we could participate in the event and create a haunted attraction. And he was all for it. He was like, yeah, this is what you guys want to do and you know a lot about this, so why not? And it was around August when we came back to school and they told me about it and I was like, let's do it. It's a great opportunity.
All right, so we all know about Morrill Tower's creepy past. So tell us about your club and some of the projects you've done and how you've approached it with the Ohio State Theme Park Engineering Club. I mean, Morrill Tower is kind of the perfect place for a haunted house, you have to admit.
You are exactly right about Morrill Tower being the perfect place for a haunted attraction. There's a lot of history when it comes to the checkered and kind of depressing aspect, which you can look up on the internet. But the way our club works is we have weekly general body meetings just to talk about the industry, invite new members, do activities that have to do with just the industry in general. And we also go on a lot of trips to theme parks. We go to conferences like ASTM, IAAPA right now. We participate in the TMTDC competition. So a lot of us do want to go into the industry, but there's also room for members that want to just enjoy the industry and talk about it and discuss. But we have done a lot of projects in the past, which you can look up on our website, tpegOSU.com. But usually we do an annual Light Up the Lake show, which is a holiday light show at Near Lake at Ohio State. So that's our annual project. But I guess I introduced how this came about through the hall director. And it was the beginning of August, and I had to gather interest in the club who wants to do a haunted attraction. It was the beginning, our first meeting, and we had 33 members that wanted to participate, which is a big number for our club, because usually we have about 20 members a week that come to our general body meetings. And so I gathered interest. I created project teams based on what people were interested in doing. So I had a set design team, a lighting and sound design team, we had a storytelling team, and we also had a business and marketing team. And so the first challenge we had to approach was, what do we want to create? And we were given constraints by the hall director, who I coordinated with. He did not want any sort of horror or gore for students. He didn't want anything that would be triggering, or people that are sensitive to, for example, strobe lights or any sort of sensitive topics like we discussed, because Morrill Tower has had such a bad background. He wanted it to be inclusive for everybody. And so we had to come up with something creative, and it was challenging because usually haunted houses have a lot of gore, they have a lot of just blood, dark things, which makes them entertaining. So we had to figure out what to approach, and we wanted to tie it into Morrill Tower and Ohio State in general to make it unique. So the story that the storytelling team came up with was, we came up with a fake club that existed in the 1980s called the Cryptid Club. And the Cryptid Club was a very passionate club who researched cryptids. And so one night on Halloween in 1984, we made up a story that they went to the Olentangy River, which is actually right by Morrill Tower, and they ventured out there and tried to look for cryptids, just a handful of their passionate members, and they went missing. And so Ohio State then shut down the club rooms that they used to participate in at Morrill Tower just to respect their missing and never being found. But in present day, so when I guess right now, the Cryptid Club reemerged, and they wanted to invite new members, kind of tell them the background of what happened to people in 1984 and just the history of their club. And so through our attraction, students would be introduced to the club and introduced to join, but then as you walk through the haunted house, you're kind of transported back to that event in 1984 and what really happened. So that was the storytelling aspect.
Now, you had some challenges with this attraction because of your constraints, and I'm thinking, how did you even pull this off? Talk about those challenges.
So throughout the process of creating this attraction, it was very difficult because we weren't given access to explore the space. I only got to see it once, and then our treasurer got to see it with me. So none of our members got to even see the space we were working in, which was pretty difficult and probably the biggest challenge that we had. And a week before the event, they switched it up on us and said that we had to do a different room. And so we had to switch up all of our show scenes. And
well, okay, so wait a minute. How can you possibly do this? You have to be. How big was the attraction? Was it the entire floor, or because in the tower there's something like 8 rooms that all face the center? Is that
yes.
right? It's kind of almost like a star, like an eight-sided star.
Yeah.
With rooms on the outside and then an elevator in the middle, something like that. Is that how it works?
Yes.
And so, were you given the entire floor? Were you given a room? How big was the room? Talk about the space and then talk about the different scenes.
I can't remember the exact dimensions of the room, but we were given one study room that students usually do their homework in for the actual attraction, and then the other study room, which is right next to it, that was for our queue. But originally we had a space that only the highest person in residency had access to, and he told us that we would have this room, and it was not a part of that 8 facing rooms towards the elevator, but we called it back rooms, and it had a lot of twists and turns, and it was genuinely perfect for a haunted attraction. So it was disappointing to hear that we had to change our space, but we managed. We're college students. We're passionate, so we stayed up, and we were under a lot of stress, but we made it work because we wanted to make it work. So we were given a study room.
This is actually a really powerful lesson for anyone thinking about creating an attraction, and that's this. If everything starts with a story, then it doesn't matter the linear path of the attraction. As long as the story is good and you theme it correctly inside, you can move the entire attraction to a different location, which is what they had to do. I actually had to do this a lot at Universal Studios. We'd realized we were over budget and we had to cut 3 scenes from an attraction. So, no problem, just cut the room and then move everything else over. Sometimes you'd even just turn the lights out and let people in a haunted house, for example, walk through it. That's scary too. So, the story and the attraction stays the same. That's worth remembering. But even more challenging was their lightning fast production time. Listen to this.
So we soft opened the attraction the day before Halloween, October 30th, and we ran it on Halloween and on November 1st, so Wednesday through Friday of October.
So that's a fast timeline. That's faster than Universal Studios, which is tremendous.
Yes.
And then how many people came to it? Did you charge for it? How did that work? You also had to learn about how to be an operations person at the same time. So talk about the operational aspect, getting something started in such a short timeline, and then the operational takeaways from this.
So we had weekly meetings between 1 and 2 hours to discuss what we wanted to design with our story, and then further, according to our budget that we were given, how to create that story. So ordering things, making sure that the hall director approved of it, just that kind of timeline of getting things together until we eventually get to construct. And so the way we did that very quickly was we were kind of told, if you want this to happen, you need to have it by this time. And it was kind of a late moment, but we all united together. And I encouraged our team, instead of being stressed about it, I came up as a leader and I was like, it's all right, guys. I understand that you're frustrated. However, if we want this to happen, we have to move. And so we kind of took about 2 to 3 days to finalize the budget, and we sent it to the hall director the day after. He responded to us within 3 days, and then immediately as we got that email, we started ordering stuff. So we had to wait for the timeline to get that stuff in, and once they came in, we immediately got to work on the construction, which was a week before we had to open. And we couldn't have meetings every single day because obviously we're students and we have school. But we met about 3 or 4 times for 2 to 3 hours to set up the construction. And we finished the day that we opened for soft open. And when it comes to operations, I had my set design leader write up an operations sheet. So I was the general manager of the house if anything serious happened or any problems with students. And then we had a queue supervisor, which is Ariana, and she's the one who operated how many people came in at a time and the timing of that. And then Jack, he was one of our scare actors, as well as the set design leader. He was the house manager who kind of managed what was happening in the house since he was in the house. And for example, one of the operations things we established was if there was an emergency, we wanted to order whistles for the scare actors to blow, but the hall director didn't want to pay for that, so we established a word, rattlesnake, which you wouldn't just hear out of the blue. And when rattlesnake was yelled, we would all turn on the lights, turn off the sound, get students out immediately that weren't involved in whatever was going on, and we would immediately stop the attraction.
Okay, and did that happen often or at all? Not at all?
No.
Okay, well that's positive. So what was your budget for this attraction, and then how did you, let me ask you this, because there may or may not have been people, like places that I've worked, not saying Universal, but where we would actually we would go dumpster diving because we're looking for props. And there were some really good things that Universal throws away. And so we said, well, we can use that in that house. What did you have to do to come up with this house?
Yeah, that's a very great question, because we kind of had a similar situation. So our budget was $1,000. We could use up to $1,000, but the goal was, or the kind of feeling was to not use all the $1,000. So I established that set design got the most amount of money, and then lighting and sound, and then towards costumes, contingency, and makeup. So that's kind of how we adjusted that $1,000. And with that, when we visited Morrill Tower and talked with the hall director, I said, what do you guys have that you can provide us? And also, do you have any sort of connections that could provide us with things? Because there is a club at Ohio State called Off the Lake, which is a huge theater organization, and they had possibly things that we could borrow. So we overall just created the budget. I said just put anything you guys can think of in the budget, and then we can narrow it down from there. Let's not narrow ourselves at first. Let's go big and bold, and then we can narrow it down. So once we did that and sent him the budget, we talked about what resources they could provide us. And after we learned about that, I adjusted the budget and took out things that we did not need. So I guess that was sort of our dumpster diving thing. They also had paint, and we created things. So, for example, we had poster boards that they provided us, and through that we were able to create with our story like club poster boards, like presenting the cryptid club, and would inform students more about it, just like a job fair if you have poster boards up. So essentially we ordered things, narrowed it down, and then further kind of adjusted things that we were given.
What did you use for show sets other than poster board, and then also about lighting and sound? Talk about that.
I'd say the big set pieces we had were tarps. Tarps were used to separate the walls and create a walkthrough experience. And then when it came to lighting, we had a lot of LED strips, and we also had a projector, and we projected images at the end of the attraction of cryptid images and videos. And then with sound, we only needed 2 speakers because the space was so small compared to a normal haunted house, and it was loud enough to kind of fill the room with sound. And we also had soundboards, so one of our sound guys, he created a soundboard and would play certain sounds when students would walk by. That's what haunted houses do. And we had an overall haunt soundtrack that we played on the one speaker. So I'd say mostly LED strips are very important, our projector, tarps to even separate the room apart. And we also had a few tables that we attached to the tarps, and we were able to put props on those tables.
There's a real lesson here that you can do a lot with a little. And I don't know if you caught this, but Audrey is showing some real leadership here, having to make mature operational and creative decisions and to stay within a budget. And the attraction was very successful. And despite not being able to charge for the attraction, the whole thing was a huge success.
But we did have 2 students. Our line got up to 20 minutes, it was honestly shocking how popular it was for me. But we had 2 students ask if they could skip the line, and they give us cash, which is pretty funny.
But Audrey and the Ohio State Theme Park Engineering Club didn't just go into this alone. They were smart about it because they learned from the experts.
I should mention that we visited Cedar Point Hollow weekends and Fear Columbus, and we were able to establish tours with them, behind-the-scenes tours, to get knowledge about how to run a haunted attraction, especially when it comes to scare moments and makeup and costume. So we kind of took that knowledge into our own haunted attraction. And I'd say the biggest constraint was learning how to scare and scare moments and using striker versus decoy actors. And then when it came to operations, how many people we let in at a time, because you have to manage, well, how long do you want students to wait in line? They'll probably want to go out on High Street and go party on Halloween, but how do we keep them in line so that they experience our attraction? So we let in about 3 to 5 people at a time, and when they were in the last show scene, which was the climax of the attraction, we would let in the next group. And as the line got busier, we started letting in about 8 people, but as guests were exiting, and something I noticed as a general manager, the excitement and the reaction was not as animated, and they didn't enjoy it as much. And we discussed during our 10 to 15 minute break on the hour, let's keep it to 3 to 5 so we can enhance the guest experience, as you would call it, so that students aren't just lazily walking through this house and they think it's a waste of time.
The lesson here is that there's safety in numbers. So the right size party can enhance the guest experience and the wrong size can detract from it. For example, if you're in a group of 10, you might see the first few people get the scare and it's ruined for you. Now, at Universal, we always use the term distraction and scare, but you're using decoy and striker. I assume they're the same idea. Talk about that.
So, exactly what you said, decoy and striker was the term that Hollow Weekends used with their live entertainment. And so, originally, since we're engineers, we didn't know much about theater, I guess, or scaring. So, since we didn't have a ton of set elements like a normal haunted house would, we had to use a decoy and striker to actually scare students. So in each area where we had a striker, we had a decoy that would kind of like you said with the piano, like the decoy would be something that the students would look at and focus their attention on, and then suddenly the striker out of the blue would come out and scare them. So I think it's a very effective way of approaching scaring and enhancing the guest experience.
And then how many scare actors did you use?
We had a total of 8 scare actors. Not all of them did it every single night, but I'd say I think 80% worked the whole 3 days, and they were extremely tired after, but it was definitely worth it. They did a good job.
Did you? And we talked about having your safe word, as it were. Were there, at Universal Halloween Horror Nights, fight or flight? A guest goes through there, they don't know how to react, and we've had guests in the past literally just go through and they're just hitting everybody as they go through, just punching. And of course that's not okay because these are paid actors, they're trying to do their job. So what was the experience with that, with the way the students behaved with the scarecrows?
Yeah, so something we established when we created our operations sheet was a sort of speech or pitch. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but before students were allowed to enter the house, like when they were at the front of the queue, we gave spiel. We gave them a spiel about how if they heard the actors, they're not allowed to touch the actors. They can't have their phones or any sort of electronic devices have any lights on. Kind of the normal spiel you would copy from an actual attraction, and something we learned from Cedar Point. And one of the things we emphasized was if you hurt any of the scare actors or tear down any of our elements in our house, you will be taken immediately to House of Residency at Morrill Tower, and you will be escorted out. And so that was something we emphasized at the end of our spiel. So I think students came in with that understanding, and we had no problems, except there was one student that blew air in our actor's face, which obviously isn't pleasant. So when they exited the attraction, immediately Jack, this actually happened to our scare actor Jack, he immediately came out and told us what happened. So we were able to grab the student and say, hey, we know you did this, please don't do it again if you come to our attraction, or otherwise we will have to do it, or we will have to act on your behavior. So
what are the other, there's obviously a lot of things that you didn't quite expect that happened, and I see you smiling. So what was unexpected that was either a learning moment or was just surprising, funny?
I'd say the biggest surprise and frustration was that we weren't able to get into the space, and I wasn't able to take my team into the space. And being a leader, I was able, I had the chance to see the space, but kind of managing the team's frustration and their motivation to continue the project was a difficult thing, and I had to navigate how to keep everybody reeled in and passionate and still excited about the project when we can't even see the space we're working in. So I encouraged them and said everything was going to be okay, because usually it does end up being okay, and when you have students that are passionate about these kinds of things, I think that passion pulls you through. So that was definitely frustrating, not having the space. Another thing was creating the budget sheet, having to constrain and limit what we were allowed to order, and also the creative aspect of our story. We couldn't use the typical haunted house lore. We couldn't use any of the quote-unquote lore of Morrill Tower. So being constrained on the story and having to think outside the box and also relate it to Ohio State and make it unique was something challenging. And I'd say thinking about operations was also challenging, because we're engineers, and I think a lot of us are more into design, and not all of us have experience in operations, so we kind of had to think outside the box and use the knowledge that we learned from Hollow Weekends and Fear Columbus in order to execute it.
Yeah. Talk about the queue, what you did there. Was it just a straight up, like a back and forth serpentine queue? Did you put them into a room, and it was this like a pre-show? How did that work?
Yeah, so originally we were going to have a pre-show in our previous space because we had more room, and our business and marketing team was actually going to work on the pre-show. We did create a pre-show, but we just didn't show it. We kind of used it as marketing for our attraction and inviting students to come and experience it. But for the queue, there was an identical study room adjacent to the study room we were using the attraction in, so we kind of created like a V-shaped, since the room was kind of V-shaped, we just made the queue a V-shape and sectioned it out with caution tape. So it wasn't the typical like switchbacks like a normal queue would be at a park, but we just use the space in a good manner, and we actually had to line out the doors, so we had to shove more students in. But I'd say we didn't really think about the queue, since we had to, like, originally we were going to really theme the queue as well and show pre-show, but when it comes to a last minute change of space, obviously the focus on the attraction is more important than the queue, and we made it work. We were able to get everybody in, so.
I think you just experienced what anyone who's ever opened an attraction has experienced. There are always unexpected challenges and things you just can't anticipate until you actually open it. So, Audrey, talk about the future of the Ohio State Theme Park Engineering Club.
I'd say for the future of our club, we will try to have Morrill again. Whether that's at Morrill Tower or another residency, we'll figure that out. But it was definitely a huge, it definitely put our club on the map, and having 504 people walk through was an accomplishment. We're trying to lean towards more technical projects in the spring, and I think fall is a great opportunity for live entertainment sort of projects, because you have a lot of holidays, and I think a lot of students with fall breaks, Christmas breaks, Thanksgiving breaks, we can all unite on the fact that we're excited for breaks and holidays. So that's something we want to focus on in the spring, in the fall, I'm sorry. But going into the spring, we want to do more technical projects. I'm not quite sure what those projects are yet. I have to think about that over our winter break, but we do want to do some sort of maybe ride model or animatronic, and I think that would be a cool learning experience for people that would rather focus on a technical design versus a live entertainment sort of project.
What is your hope when you get finished with school?
My hope when I finish school is to get into this industry. I'm not exactly sure what roadmap to take, but I definitely have gained knowledge about the industry since I was a freshman, and I know there's many different avenues, and I've also learned that this industry is very small, and a lot of people might know other people, and it's really cool to see the passion everybody has, and in the end, everything that happens in this industry is focused on the guest experience, and I'm very passionate about that, and I think through Morrill I've been able to do that myself. So I'm not exactly sure what field I want to go into, but definitely want to be in this industry.
If you think what Audrey did was amazing and you'd like to be part of some really cool projects too, perhaps you're in high school thinking about moving on to college, think about Ohio State. Maybe you want to look into the Ohio State Theme Park Engineering Club. They've got a great community, and as I mentioned, they're also not Michigan. Just kidding, Wolverines. But seriously, you're going down this year. Audrey, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do this?
To get in contact with me, I have a LinkedIn. It's just Audrey Nelson, AudreyNelson. And then my email is Audrey, L as in Lily, N as in Nelson, 24@gmail.com. And then my school email is nelson.1980@osu.edu.
All right, thank you very much.